Get some
ice cream.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to TYT. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian, and really the main thing I'm looking forward to today is our bonus episode for our members, where I will share birding adventures. Our team will share what our favorite birds are. It's gonna be bananas. We also have some special programming prepared in our members only bonus episode today. But of course, since it's members only, you'd have to be a member to watch it. You can become a member by clicking on the join button if you're watching us on YouTube, or you can go to tyt.com/join to become a member that way. We've got a lot of other content produced, researched, ready to go for you guys. I'm also excited to share those stories with you, although I will admit the very first story that I'm gonna do at the top of the rundown is something that I'm pretty furious about, something that maybe, I don't know if it's a significant portion of the audience is gonna get upset at me for having this take. I don't really care. I just think I need to make it abundantly clear that some of the behavior that I've been seeing among leftists in regard to their commentary about Hamas is unacceptable. So we're gonna break that all down in just a moment. Later in the show, we're also gonna give you an update on the housing market because I am Anna Kasparian after all. So of course I wanna dive into the housing market. It's been a while since we have. And we'll also talk a little bit about how some of the moves from the Biden administration to retaliate against China has led to this tit for tat situation in which China is now banning the exports of certain materials that we need here in the US. I'll give you the details on that story and more as well. John Iadarola will be joining me in the second hour and the bonus episode of the show today. Looking forward to that. It's been a while since we've hosted together in the flesh, in person. So that'll be in the second hour. Now, without further ado, all the lefties out there who are looking for any excuse to badger me on social media, please get your phones ready, put the screen record feature on, let's get to it.
Calling Hamas a terrorist organization is ridiculous, racist, and plays into genocidal propaganda that is flooding our media and that we should be doing everything possible to combat.
I support the right of Palestinians to resist occupation, including through Hamas, the armed wing of the unified Palestinian resistance.
That was in Oakland during last night's city council meeting. And it's really hard to overstate, and I'm gonna try to be calm, open-minded, understanding, and not use the rhetoric that I really wanna use, like the fact that I can't overstate how much I despise these people and how self-indulgent and stupid they are. And yes, that is an ad hominem attack. That is exactly what it is, but it's also the perfect description, okay, to let everyone know who these people really are. Now, let me just back up and tell you what the city council meeting was about, what was being debated. The city council was deciding on whether or not, and of course this is symbolic, to call for a ceasefire for the aerial bombardments carried out by Israel against Hamas in the Gaza Strip to stop because of the high civilian death toll. Day after day, I come on this show and I condemn what the IDF's been doing. I've been condemning and speaking out against the disgusting genocidal statements that members of the Likud party have been making since October 7th. So I've been very clear about where I stand in regard to the various international war crime violations that Israel has engaged in. But I'm also not an idiot, and I don't fall for propaganda by a group of people who carried out some of the most vicious atrocities against innocent civilians in Israel. I don't need to carry water for them, and I don't need to fall for their stupid propaganda. But unfortunately, there's some fragment of the left, and I'm hoping it is a tiny, tiny fragment of the left, that's stupid enough to look at propaganda videos where Hamas is releasing the hostages. And gee, I don't know, some of the family members of the hostages that are being released might still be held captive by Hamas. And so when you see the hostages who are being released wave to the cameras and awkwardly look like they're happy about the situation, could it be that they're concerned about their family members who are still held captive by Hamas, which, by the way, also committed international war crimes by, kidnapping innocent Israeli civilians? So look, I want to break down the arguments made by these individuals who were incensed over the fact that the measure that was voted on by the city council, which did in fact pass. They did decide to pass a measure calling for Israel to engage in a ceasefire. They did that, okay? But they also wanted to include a provision that made it abundantly clear that they condemn Hamas, which should be an easy thing to do, but apparently it's not easy to do. It's not easy to do. So I'm gonna break down the dumb arguments that were made by these leftists who think they're revolutionaries because they support Hamas and they think that's somehow representative of freedom fighters in Palestine. Break them down, debunk them, and then I'm gonna tell you how this is actually incredibly counterproductive for anyone who actually gives a damn about the well-being, freedom, and statehood of the Palestinian people. Let's go to the first video.
There's not been beheadings of babies and rapings. Israel murdered their own people on October 7th.
There's been a lot of atrocity propaganda ranging from claims of beheaded babies to mass rape.
Arguing that Hamas didn't carry out atrocities on October 7th is both ignorant and shameful. It's also indecent and incredibly cruel to the victims on October 7th. Some Israelis, by the way, have actually accused Palestinians of faking their deaths or faking their injuries and wounds. They're crisis actors, right? The crisis actor narrative has come from some on the pro-Israel side. And we have condemned that because it's disgusting. There is no evidence that you have Palestinians faking their own deaths. I mean, that is Alex Jones level Sandy Hook propaganda, okay? But people are engaging in it on the Israeli side, and then you have morons like the ones you just heard from engaging in it publicly during a city council meeting because they somehow think it is helpful to deny the atrocities that Hamas carried out. I don't know how many examples we need to provide, but one of the videos that I can't get out of my mind, okay, because I'm a human being, and when I see other human beings suffering, regardless of what their politics are, regardless of where they reside, my heart breaks. I don't enjoy seeing it, and I don't want to provide cover for what's being happening to them. But what's so disgusting to me is we've all seen the video of an Israeli woman being forced into a truck by members of Hamas. She's wearing pants, but her backside is absolutely covered in blood. I wonder what happened to her. Why would she have all this blood on her backside? Oh, but there's no evidence of rapes that occurred during these atrocities. It's true that Israel hasn't released evidence of decapitated babies. That doesn't mean that it's already proven that babies weren't decapitated. We don't know, we really don't know. But I would just venture to say that maybe, just maybe, there's the possibility that the family members of those children wouldn't want photos of those babies being decapitated floating around all over on the internet. I don't know, that I could be wrong. I could be wrong. They might find that incredibly cruel. They might be re-traumatized by that over and over again. Maybe that's why they didn't want that out. But again, I don't know. I agree, we haven't seen those photos. We haven't seen that evidence. But I've seen enough evidence of the atrocities that Hamas committed to acknowledge that they committed atrocities. And I don't need to provide cover for them to also simultaneously find the behavior and the military actions of the IDF abhorrent and in violation of international laws. You can hold those two thoughts at the same time. I know it's crazy. If we're disgusted by the crisis actor conspiracy theories coming from the pro-Israeli side, pro-Israel side, I should say, we should be just as disgusted when we hear the type of arguments, those same types of arguments being made of Hamas. By the way, again, I want to reiterate, taking civilians as hostages breaks international laws. It's a war crime. Now, Human Rights Watch also verified some of the videos that came out featuring Hamas carrying out these atrocities. So I'm gonna give you some descriptions here. They're hard to hear about. I mean, I personally find them incredibly hard to hear about, read about. So I wanna give fair warning to people who still have, a soul, the ability to feel anything when it comes to human lives. But here are, again, this is Human Rights Watch. Here are the verified descriptions of the videos that Human Rights Watch has looked at. In one verified video, dashcam footage taken at 7:55 a.m. shows 7 gunmen, including several yelling in Arabic, kick a shirtless man in front of a bomb shelter connected to the Ingraham Junction bus stop, just a few minutes walk south of the location of the Supernova Music Festival. One gunman shouts in Arabic, "Guys, inside here." And they appear to argue briefly before another gunman throws an object into the shelter. A man dressed in civilian clothes dashes out. The gunmen yell, "Take aim," and shoot at him from behind as he tries to flee. As they are shooting, there is an explosion inside the shelter. The video ends, and it is unclear whether either man survived. That also reminds me of one of the other verified incidents that happened on October 7th. And this is one of the incidents that I also have a hard time forgetting about. So a father runs into a shelter where his 2 sons are. A Hamas militant throws a grenade into that shelter. The father dies. Somehow, miraculously, the 2 young sons survive. They start wailing and crying. One of them says, why couldn't we die? Why are we still alive? And the other, his brother looks at him and says, we're gonna die, aren't we? And as this is happening, a Hamas militant opens their fridge and proceeds to enjoy a Coke, a soda. Oh, no, these are freedom fighters, right? I mean, look at the freedom they managed to secure for the Palestinian people who are now suffering brutal aerial bombardments by the IDF. Wow, great job. Real great strategy there. Disgusting, absolutely disgusting. I'm disgusted by anyone that would provide cover for this, but I have more. CNN visited that shelter, by the way, on October 9th and reported that its interior was splattered with blood, which would happen, as you fire into the building in an effort to shoot and kill individuals. Or if you throw a grenade into a building with the intention of killing individuals within that building. In a second verified video, security camera footage filmed at 8:43 a.m., a man in civilian clothing who appears to be fatally shot lies bleeding on the ground in front of a kibbutz. A group of gunmen congregate in front of a structure close to the dead man, and one throws an object toward it. Within 15 seconds, there is an explosion inside the structure, and a gunman drags out a person, shoots them at close range, and beats them with the butt of his rifle as the other gunmen look on. The New York Times also reports of just how indiscriminate Hamas's atrocities were. Obviously, they targeted everyone. It wasn't just IDF soldiers. They also went after civilians, as is very clear here, but they also went after other foreigners. Those killed in Israel on October 7th also include foreigners and dual nationals. At least 31 US citizens and 39 French citizens were killed during the attacks. Authorities in both countries have said other victims include at least 34 Thai nationals. Asian workers were a common sight in the farms near Israel's border with Gaza. So do these people's lives matter, or are they martyrs in the quest for freedom for the Palestinians? And did they get that? Or are we seeing Palestinians live better lives today after Hamas carried out the atrocities it carried out? Of course not. It has made the possibility of an actual 2-state solution at this point pretty impossible. And for anyone who thought that a 1-state solution, I get it. Look, I have empathy for people who genuinely think that that can be accomplished. A 1-state solution, a democratic country where Israelis and Palestinians live side by side coexist, everything is fine. It's not gonna happen. There's too much animosity, there's too much history. Realistically, a two-state solution made a lot more sense to me. We're further from that than I think we've ever been. And there's a good possibility that what the IDF is currently carrying out is ethnically cleansing the Gaza Strip. So mission accomplished, freedom fighters? Speaking of the freedom fighters argument, I wanna go to the next video. Let's watch.
As an Arab, asking with this context to condemn Hamas is very anti-Arab racist.
Calling Hamas a terrorist organization is ridiculous, racist, and plays into genocidal propaganda that is flooding our media and that we should be doing everything possible to combat.
Did anyone else notice that those who oppose this resolution are old white supremacists?
Weaponizing racism, sexism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, I'm sick of it. Okay, asking people to condemn Hamas is not racist. It's just not. It is a lazy and boring argument, just as lazy and boring as the people who want to shut down critique of the Israeli government by calling anyone who engages in that conversation an anti-Semite. Obviously, that doesn't work anymore because people have felt more and more emboldened to speak out, and that's a good thing, okay? But I'm also gonna feel just as emboldened to speak out against these morons as they provide cover for atrocities committed by Hamas. And look, this is different from people who wanna make the case that the way Israel has treated Palestinians has led to more extremism. That is an argument that I think has a lot of credibility. But that is also very different from then saying, oh, the extremists are totally okay in carrying out atrocities. That's when you go too far. You see the distinction? At least 50% of the homes in Gaza right now, totally demolished, okay? I don't understand how anyone can see the aftermath of what Hamas did and think that they were justified in doing it, that it was somehow moral to commit the war crimes and atrocities that they did. And then make the argument that it's somehow a good thing for Palestinians, who, by the way, haven't been allowed to have an election in the Gaza Strip since 2006. They're not able to practice in a democratic process. They're not able to cast a ballot for who they want to be their leaders. They are forced, okay? They're forced to live under the rule of Hamas. Half of the people living in Gaza weren't even born in 2006 when Hamas was elected. So the idea that Hamas is somehow good, a force for good in this equation is insane to me. All right. By the way, and one other thing I need to say, let's dispel the notion that Hamas consists of freedom fighters, really. And you're about to hear the arguments here, and then I'm gonna tell you why what Hamas did. I mean, I can't believe I have to spell it out, but what Hamas did ended up being devastatingly counterproductive. Let's watch.
I support the right of Palestinians to resist occupation, including through Hamas, the armed wing of the unified Palestinian resistance.
Hamas is not a terrorist organization just because the US and Israel deems it so. Hamas is a resistance organization that is fighting for the liberation of Palestinian people and their land.
Please seek help. Just please, for the love of God, seek help. What Hamas did has already led to, obviously, the retaliatory slaughter of tens of thousands of Palestinian civilians. So congratulations, I guess. Okay, at least 50%, the numbers have actually gone up a little bit. 60% of residential property, homes in the Gaza Strip, gone, destroyed through Israel's aerial bombardment. So did the freedom fighters get what they wanted? But there's more. The outcome of this could very likely, I want to repeat this, lead to the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. So the argument that what Hamas is doing represents armed resistance, as if what they're doing is somehow helpful to the cause that we've been fighting for the Palestinian people, it's lunacy. It's what lunatics say. Lunacy. And just take a look at what the former Israeli prime minister just recently said during an interview on CNN. This is Naftali Bennett. And this gives you a little peek inside the future of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. This is what the freedom fighters have led to. Congratulations, let's watch.
Israel would retain overall security and defense responsibility, but we don't want to govern the Gazans. So what I think we would do is create an interim technocratic self-government that would say for about 5 years govern Gaza, denazify Gaza, which means clean out all the incitement, all the education that all Jews are pigs and devils. And after 5 years, we would revisit and figure out how to create a sustainable government, perhaps with our Abraham Accord partners, countries in that area.
Okay, so let me decode that for you. We are going to occupy the Gaza Strip for security reasons. And it goes more than just preventing the import-export of the Gaza Strip. It's about actually being there, having boots on the ground, Israeli forces on the ground in Gaza for security purposes, right? Censorship, what the students in Gaza can and cannot learn about. I mean, it's more restrictions, okay, more occupation, a puppet government. I mean, that's essentially what he's proposing here. Naftali Bennett is saying, like, we're prop up a puppet government that we'll have control over. Is this the freedom that the freedom fighters were fighting for? Is that what happened here? And the biggest problem with this faction of the left, and God, I hope it's a tiny faction, I don't know. They're real loud. And unfortunately, since they're super loud, they end up making all of us look like we agree with them. I don't agree with them. I find them super toxic, super problematic, super counterproductive. Okay, the problem with them is that what they tend to advocate for isn't really about improving the lives of all people. Their ideology is really about improving the lives of one group of people at the cost of another group of people. And you see this when it comes to criminal justice reform. It became very clear to me with criminal justice reform. They want criminal justice reform that leads to a softer criminal justice system for the actual perpetrators of crimes, including violent crimes, at the expense of the victims of the crimes. No, I'm not on board with that. I'm not gonna sign on to that. Because I envision a world where we improve the lives of everyone, where we create a just justice system, where those who are accused are treated fairly, and the victims of these crimes are able to get their own justice. But the way that these leftists handle situations is everything is through the oppressed and oppressor lens, rather than a dialectical lens. And when you see a situation as complicated as this war through a oppressor-oppressed lens, well, then it's really easy to dehumanize innocent civilians on the Israeli side, and I refuse to do that. In fact, most leftists, I would venture to say, are on board with what I'm saying. It's just these super annoying, loud idiots who show up to city council meetings in Oakland, in Los Angeles, and embarrass all of us, and provide fodder for dishonest actors who want to use them and what they say to paint take broad strokes and paint a picture of what the entirety of the left is about. So the reason why I talk about these stories, I know, Majority Report got mad at me for speaking out against some of the lunacy that happens on the left, because they feel that it's not smart, it makes the left look bad, don't do that, don't do that. Because we're supposed to be propagandists for the left and provide cover even for those who engage in bad behavior. I refuse, that's not what I'm into. What I'm into is holding members of our own side accountable, and at least drawing a distinction to make it abundantly clear, we're not with this. We're not in favor of this. This is not what the left represents. Because if you think avoiding any conversation about it is going to lead to a situation in which people don't know about the morons who said these moronic things at the Oakland City Council meeting, you'd be mistaken. You'd be mistaken. There's a very real effort right now to lump together level-headed people, okay? Level-headed people who believe in freedom, peace, dignity for all, with these ignorant leftists. That's the reason why I think it's important to speak out against it. They think that they're freedom fighters. They think that they're being helpful when in reality, again, they are feeding into some of the paranoia that Jewish people in America are really struggling with right now, because they think, oh my God, there's a giant population within our own borders who don't value our lives. And why would you want to make anyone feel like that? Why would you want to provide fodder for the right wing when the right wing wants to paint the left as apologists for groups that carry out some of the most vicious atrocities imaginable? Why? Why would you want that? Again, this provides fodder for dishonest actors who seek to deflect from Israel's war crimes by instead fear-mongering about the entirety of the left allegedly having the same thought process as what you experienced in those videos. And it's not true. And it's about time the general left grow a set and speak out against these lunatics, because they are a liability. And if you want to actually accomplish something, the self-indulgent idiots that you saw in those videos are going to be an obstacle to accomplishing the policies that we want. Anyway, some of you might get mad, get mad. My views on Israel have been clear. My views on Hamas have been clear. My moral compass is clear. Innocent people should not be brutalized on either side, period. That's it. We got to take a break. When we come back, we'll switch gears, talk about the housing market. Twitch community, we've got Pool Champ 1996 in disagreement with me, whatever that's me, and I'm proud socialist. So Melanie, proud socialist. If you don't believe that these are people on the left, proud socialist, Pool Champ 1999. Okay, and I'm not changing. By the way, we care about justice, just not justice for innocent Israeli civilians who get slaughtered, of course. And we don't dehumanize, and I'm not an idiot. If you provide cover for Hamas, you are inhumane and you are an idiot. And yeah, you're a member of our audience. I hope you're offended by what I have to say, and I hope you think long and hard about what you're providing cover for. Let's move on. All right. The housing market is, of course, no better than it was 15 years ago. In fact, 15 years ago, it was actually a lot better. And because of high interest rates, the housing market has become even more unaffordable for ordinary Americans, and it has led to inflation both in residential homes that people seek to buy and also rentals. So let's get into the details on this. It all really dates back to the Obama administration and how the Obama administration responded to the housing crash of 2008. And I'll get to what I mean by that in just a moment, but first let's take a step back and take a look at the entirety of the housing market and why we're experiencing what is currently happening. So as was reported in The Atlantic, at this time 15 years ago, real estate agents had 2.2 million vacant housing units available to show prospective buyers. That number has dwindled and now sits at just 732,000, despite the country having added 30 million people to its population. So clearly there's a huge issue here with inventory. We need to build more housing. The population is growing, but the inventory of housing is dwindling. The Case-Shiller index of home prices sits near its highest ever inflation-adjusted level, according to the data here. And houses are unaffordable for middle-class families across the country. The monthly payment on a new home has increased by more than 50% in the past 3 years, as 30-year mortgage rates have climbed from less than 3% to nearly 8%. So the problem that we're experiencing is actually twofold. Think about what happened following the coronavirus pandemic and the shutdowns. As soon as that happened, of course, the government is concerned about the financial stability of ordinary people, especially the tens of millions of Americans who were laid off through no fault of their own. So they immediately kick into gear, think about policy that can provide some financial relief to people. And then you have the Federal Reserve, of course, this unelected body of individuals who decide what the interest rates are gonna be. Interest rates were already low when the coronavirus pandemic began. However, they hit rock bottom when the Federal Reserve decided to further lower the interest rates in order to make borrowing cheaper at a time when, again, tens of millions of Americans were laid off. Now that led to a huge problem, okay? Because what ended up happening is it became cheaper to take out a mortgage. A lot of people refinanced, and that ended up being a good financial outcome for them because they got a lower interest rate for their mortgage. But a lot of first-time home buyers are like, why are we living in this super expensive city when we can actually buy a home with a super low mortgage interest rate in a far more affordable part of town, right? Or maybe we can move to the suburbs, maybe even a rural part of the country. We can work from home. We could totally do this. And so a lot of people who live in big cities, who are professionals, who had the means to put a down payment on a home, decided to move to more affordable parts of the country. But that also ended up increasing the value of housing in those parts of the country, right? So all of a sudden you're seeing inflation in housing in areas that were typically thought of as more affordable for people. Then what made the matter worse is the inflation was apparent, the Federal Reserve gets involved, and they decide we are going to now increase the interest rates and make borrowing far more expensive. So now you go from 3% interest rates to 7% interest rates. The cost of borrowing is a lot more. And the thought is the higher the interest rate, well, that means the price of housing is gonna come down. But that ain't gonna happen if you have a shortage of inventory. So that is what happened here, right? We weren't building more housing. Interest rates went up, which means borrowing in order to buy a home became far more costly. The value of the home shot up as well. And since we're not building additional housing, the prices of those homes are not going down because there's still too little supply, a lot of demand, and the cost of borrowing to buy whatever housing is available is even more expensive. So it's just this vicious cycle because clearly you need developers to develop more housing. You need them to build more housing. But guess what? They're not gonna do it because most developers need to borrow for the materials that they need to develop the housing. And so if the interest rates are high, they're not gonna take out those loans, they ain't gonna build those houses. At the same time, people who secured those low interest rates during the coronavirus pandemic aren't gonna move because if they move, they need a new place to live. And if they're gonna buy a new home, that means they're gonna get locked into a much higher interest rate. So a lot of people who might wanna sell, a lot of people who might wanna move feel like they're stuck as a result. So that's the situation that we're dealing with right now, and it's absolutely devastating for people who need a place to live. Inflation in housing exists for individuals looking to buy a home. If you can't afford it, then you have no choice but to rent. And that led to additional demand for rentals. That also increases the price of rent. So as Annie Lowrey in The Atlantic writes, this is the uncomfortable equilibrium the market finds itself in today. Nobody's selling because nobody's buying. Nobody's buying because nobody's selling. Nobody can afford to sell. Nobody can afford to buy. Prices are high, mortgage costs are high, rents are high. And there's not a huge amount of rental inventory. Everyone's stuck and paying more than they want to. And so what exactly do families do if they really need to buy a home? Like what is the easiest way to buy a home in a situation like this? Well, as Lowrey notes, you'd have to buy in cash, which is insane because even in, let's just take it in the context of Los Angeles, which I will admit is more expensive than most parts of the country. But nonetheless, even if you're talking about a working class community, let's talk about Reseda, California, which is where I grew up. That is a traditionally working class community. It was working class back then, it's working class now. Majority Latino community as well. Houses there, you're lucky if you come across an $800,000 home. That's how expensive housing has become. So the idea of paying for housing in cash is insane to me. It means that this housing crisis that we're experiencing is further growing this gap between the haves and have-nots. It's leading to more inequality, economically speaking. This spring, 2 out of every 3 buyers in Manhattan paid with cash. So if you can't take out a loan, if it's too costly for you, well then you're very unlikely to be able to buy a home, or you happen to be rich and you can just do it in cash. That's basically what's happening here. And unfortunately, as Lowry notes, there is more pain to come. So as Daryl Fairweather, who's the chief economist over at Redfin, says, once mortgage rates drop, that will actually reactivate the housing market, leading to more demand. With a limited supply, that would only lead to higher prices because people would engage in bidding wars. And that is actually what we were experiencing prior to the pandemic and during the pandemic. It was hard to buy a home because there were bidding wars among those who were able to qualify for a low interest mortgage. And that also led to the price of homes going up because bidding wars naturally are gonna lead to higher prices or sale prices for these houses. And even though there's really no good news on housing in the near future, apparently there could be some good news down the road, long term. Many states and municipalities have passed laws to promote housing development in the past 3 years, easing zoning restrictions, allowing high rises near transit hubs, and preventing owners from stopping development to protect their own home's value. So that's all good news, but unfortunately it takes a while for those types of policies to really make an impact, for you to actually see the benefits of those types of policies. What could happen on a federal level is, if we had a functioning Congress that actually gave a damn about issues like this and wanted to work on behalf of the best interests of Americans, they might actually pass policies that would provide low interest loans to developers in order to incentivize them to build more housing. There are other ways to get around this and increase the inventory of housing while doing so. Another thing that municipalities should do, can do, is take a look at the inventory of vacant rental units and see how long they've been sitting there vacant. Landlords should be pressured to rent those vacant units. And so in LA, this didn't pass, unfortunately. It just kind of fell through the cracks and they never brought it up again. But several years ago, the city council was thinking about implementing additional taxes against landlords who just aren't renting their empty apartments. They just sit there for whatever reason. Maybe they don't want to lower the rental price and attract, possible tenants. Who knows? Maybe they don't want to do the additional improvements before they rent to someone. But offering either incentives to these landlords or disincentives toward keeping them empty could also be a solution. But there are other big picture issues as well, including foreign investment in residential real estate, which I think should be banned for the time being. I'm not saying it should be banned forever, but at least for the time being, if we have a housing shortage, we shouldn't have wealthy people living in other countries, no interest in living here, but they're looking for a place to park their money. There's a lot of that kind of investment happening. That should stop. We should stop private equity firms from buying up residential properties as an investment. Housing should be maintained and saved for ordinary people looking for a place to live. But the biggest problem that I see here is that there doesn't really seem to be any will among those who are elected as public servants to do a damn thing about this. We've been talking about Israel a lot. We've been talking about the military funding that Biden proposed, $106 billion. The House passed that easily. It hasn't passed in the Senate yet. But I bring that up because whenever it comes to military funding that typically gets funneled to private businesses, defense contractors, little debate. I mean, the housing crisis doesn't even appear to be on their radar. And that should tell you something about who they feel they need to serve here. Definitely is not us. Anyway, we gotta take a break. We'll be back with more in just a minute.
Calling Hamas a terrorist organization is ridiculous.
We got a moron here.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the show. Anna Kasparian with you. All right, one more story that I want to do before we bring John in. And just, I don't know if people are going to disagree with this. I hope they don't, but Laura Ingraham said something that was based, so let's get to it.
My speed limit is limited to 40.
Now, what you just saw is already a reality in some European cars and will be in all new European cars starting in 2024. It can only go so fast. And you know that since the Democrats love the EU, they love Europe, they always want to be in Europe, they want to do the same thing here in the United States. Don't forget your constitutional rights. Those can be damned, even your movement controlled. The National Transportation Safety Board is recommending that all new vehicles get technology that makes speeding, quote, more difficult or completely impossible.
Laura Ingram's right. I never in a million years thought I would say it, but she is right. And we should not be taking what the EU is doing as an example of what should be implemented here in the United States. But unfortunately, it appears Pete Buttigieg is taking a note and considering implementing these policies. So I'll get to that in just a moment. Last year, the EU did in fact announce that all new cars sold in Europe must come outfitted with anti-speeding technology called intelligent speed assistance. Now, it's not all that intelligent. In fact, oftentimes it malfunctions. We'll get to that as well. But I just don't think we need the government mandating that our vehicles like serve as our nannies and tell us what we can and can't do. Okay? You want law enforcement to monitor the roads and stop people and give them citations when they're speeding? Great, in favor of that. I don't want my car to automatically slow down or make it impossible for me to go a little over the speed limit. I think that that's too invasive, too intrusive, and I'm not in favor of it. So the regulation in the EU, by the way, requires all new cars to include this anti-speeding technology by 2024. And under the regulation, auto manufacturers must implement one of several of these tech options that'll basically kick into gear when a driver goes over the speed limit. The car can alert the driver with a visual warning followed by an acoustic or vibrating warning. That's the least offensive one out of all of them for me, right? Okay, fine. It's just like the seatbelt notification where it's like, please fasten seatbelt, please fasten seatbelt. I'm not saying that I don't fasten my seatbelt, but just give me a minute, okay? Give me a minute. And I've learned to deal with that. It's fine, it's fine. The seatbelt's important, it's fine. And if you wanna implement this for speeding, okay, fine. But this is where it starts to get super annoying. The gas pedal can gently push back on the driver's foot. No. Or the car can automatically reduce the speed. No. I'm gonna take a quick vote in the studio. Raise your hand if you're in favor of this. I'm not gonna retaliate. Okay, no one's in favor of it. Guys, what are we doing? All right, there's more. Let me finish that graphic. The driver can override the latter two functions, the EU said, by pushing slightly harder on the gas pedal. Okay, so the tech has some issues, as I mentioned earlier. It's not foolproof, and that's the other issue I have with this. And by the way, there's all sorts of safety features on vehicles now that I do think malfunction time to time, and it's super annoying. I remember one time my car, it has this technology where it'll stop before it rear ends the car in front of me. One time that happened when the car in front of me was super far away. I was on the freeway. The car just stopped in the middle of the road, in the middle of the freeway, which was incredibly dangerous and terrified the crap out of me. In this case, as Autocar notes, ISA technology still isn't perfected. During one test, the ISA system was occasionally slow to respond, and at one point set the speed limit at 60 miles per hour while driving through a quiet English village. Seems like that kind of defeats the purpose, okay? And guess what? Ingraham is also correct about the National Transportation Safety Board and how they would like to implement this policy here in the United States. The National Transportation Safety Board has recommended that all new automobiles come equipped with technology meant to make speeding difficult or impossible. It's the second such recommendation from the NTSB in 6 years. That was reported by NBC News just recently. Now look, it is true that speeding in some cases leads to horrific accidents, lives are lost. For instance, last year, more than 12,000 people in the United States died in speed-related crashes. It is a problem. I say we hire more cops to monitor the roads and stop people who are driving erratically and too quickly, okay? I don't want technology in my car that's going to automatically do anything other than automatically, the automatic transmission, I'm good with that. But I don't want it to automatically slow down my speed. That's super weird and I'm not in favor of it. It's too invasive. And look, 12,000 people dying a year from speed-related car crashes is devastating. I don't want to make light of that. I don't want to downplay that. But we also have a lot of other problems, like the fact that we have over 100,000 Americans who die of drug overdoses every year in this country at this point. The fact that you have a government agency hyper-focused on implementing policies that would automatically make your car slow down if you're driving too fast, I don't think that's a priority, but there is some good news here. So apparently Sarah Sulik, a public affairs specialist for the NTSB, noted that the board does not have regulatory or enforcement powers and that it initially recommended incentivizing intelligent speed assistance technology to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration back in 2017. The status of that recommendation, even now that it's been reiterated, is listed as non-urgent. And I would agree with that. Non-urgent. Let's stay away from it. I do not support it. That doesn't mean I want people to speed. I don't want people to drive erratically. I just don't like I think Ingraham is right. I don't like this obsession with control, right? Making it increasingly difficult for people to just exist, knowing that their government trusts them to be good, law-abiding citizens who aren't gonna drive erratically. Some people will, and some people do. And those people should be held to account. They should deal with the citations. They should deal with the cops stopping them. But implementing technology that makes your car automatically slow down because it deems that you're going too quickly in any particular zone, I just think it's too intrusive. It's too much. It's too nanny state feeling, and I'm not in favor of that. So I'm curious what you guys think, because I'm sure some people disagree. Again, this is not to minimize the problems that persist as a result of people speeding. I just think, why punish ordinary people with this super annoying technology in their cars when you should just hold the people who are speeding and driving erratically accountable? You should have better monitoring of the roads. Maybe you have, radar speed checks that doesn't even involve a cop, and you get a citation in the mail, and that spanks you a little bit, and you realize you shouldn't be speeding. Whatever. I just don't want this in my car. I really hope this doesn't come to fruition. Curious what you guys think. We're gonna take a quick break. When we come back, John Iadarola will be joining me for the second hour of the show.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.